Well, hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Rabin. Our guest today is Michelle Seiler Tucker. She is the founder and CEO of her firm, Seiler Tucker. She has many certifications, including, and I thought this was interesting, she's one of only 3 women in the United States to hold the Merger and Acquisition Master Intermediary certification, which tells you a little bit about her line of work, and we'll explore that today. She has an upcoming book. It's available for pre-order now. It's called Exit Rich, the 6P Method to Sell Your Business for Huge Profit. And she has a previous book called Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth. Michelle, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Great, Mark. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for being here. And I'm really interested to learn more about your line of work and the books. But as we normally do, we'll start off and ask you to tell a story. What do you consider to be your favorite mistake?
I made so many mistakes, but I would say my favorite was so I used to be in franchise sales, franchise consulting, franchise development, and I transitioned into selling companies. And I transitioned to selling small businesses first, and now I sell businesses 20 million and up. But my biggest mistake, or my favorite mistake, was our first closing was a flower shop, and contacted the attorney that they wanted to do the closing. The landlord was out of the country, and I asked the attorney, I said, well, can we close without a lease? And he goes, yes, we'll just have this document transition to a lease or something like that beforehand, and we can close without a lease. And I said, okay. So we go to the closing table, buyer, seller, attorneys, husbands, spouses are there. And so we get through all the closing documents, and I said, okay, where's the lease? And I looked at the attorney, and I said, you said we have to have the lease that you can do this transition agreement. And he goes, no, I never said that. I never said that. You have to have a lease. You can't close without a lease. I never told you that. So he lied. But I went to the closing without getting a lease, didn't know any better. And that was a huge mistake. The buyer was really upset with me. The seller was really upset with me. And they all loved the attorney and hated me. So I relied upon the attorney and what he said instead of doing my own due diligence to make sure I could do the closing without the lease. I ended up closing 2 weeks later. But that was, a big mistake that I learned from, and I've never done that again.
Well, thank you for sharing that story, Michelle. And I mean, that's the theme of the podcast here, is learning from mistakes. So I was wondering if you could kind of, elaborate a little bit on this idea of, relying on the attorney, or, we all as business people have specialists that
Right.
we rely on them, for specialized information. How do you strike the balance today if you're looking at a situation of when do you rely on or trust that expert versus doing your own due diligence?
So the big lesson that came out of that, Mark, is I trust, but I verify.
There we go.
So I trust, but I verify. I inspect what I expect. So now if I ask an attorney something, I double check, and I'll call other attorneys, or nowadays you can pretty much pull up anything on Google. So I'll search Google, or I'll call backup attorneys or backup CPAs, and I'll ask multiple people now. So I trust but verify. That's the number one thing.
Yeah, there's the expression that dates back to the Reagan administration.
Right.
Trust but verify. And from my background, when you said inspect what you expect, that resonates with me. My roots originally were in manufacturing, and people talking about you get what you expect, but you have to double check and not assume.
Well, and that's a problem that a lot of business owners make, is that they delegate. They finally learn how to delegate, because most entrepreneurs are control freaks and they don't want to delegate. But then it's like opposite, right? Like they're all in, doing everything themselves, or they decide I'm going to delegate everything.
Yeah.
But then they let go of so much control, they never come back to inspect it, or they never put that liaison in place that can go from department to department to make sure things are getting done correctly. And I've seen it happen time and time and time again, where the owner thinks everything is going smoothly, and come to find out it's not, and nobody was inspecting the quality.
Yeah. So before we talk more about exiting a business and your experiences and recommendations around that, maybe we can talk about common mistakes when people are building or running a business. I saw in one of the clips you speaking about, the question of, is somebody building a business or have they just created a job? Like I read the book, The E-Myth, probably 20 years ago, which I think
I'm
first.
friends with Michael Gerber. I know Michael Gerber
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah. And so, that idea first stuck with me of, if you're going to build a business, you've got to have something that's scalable and something you can take a vacation away from. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Building a business as opposed to just a job, and then how does that impact an eventual exit?
So a lot of business owners have created a job that they go to work at rather than a business that works for them. And when buyers are looking to buy a business, there's 5 different types of buyers, and we talk about that in my book, Exit Rich. But buyers want to buy a business that's not dependent upon the owner. If the owner is dependent in that business, then that owner is going to have to stay on for so many years and or just sell a percentage of their company and hold a percentage. They're not going to be able to sell outright. So buyers are really looking for a business that's sustainable, that is not dependent upon the owner. So the first thing, we talk about the 6 P's in Exit Rich, and that first P is people. Buyers want to make sure they're buying a company that has tenured employees. They want to make sure that they have the right people in the right seat. They want to make sure that they have a management team in place.
Right.
And that there's also some non-competes for key employees as well. And they want to make sure that there are W-2s, not necessarily 1099s, because if you're in manufacturing, we have a manufacturing plant that has about 150 1099s in their plant. If they have a catastrophic event occur and there's no workers' comp, that's going to be a huge issue. That could close that business down. So now we have to do the math to figure out what it would cost to convert these these non-employees to employees. So people's number one.
Right.
And I would say business owners make big mistakes when it comes to people. They don't document things correctly. They don't always have employee handbook signed. They don't always have the non-competes for key employees. And a lot of times they have 1099s in place where they should have W-2s.
One of the other P's is process, right?
Yes, that's number 3. I number all of my P's.
Yeah.
So process is number 3. And I will tell you, it's probably the most overlooked by business owners because business owners are focused on everything else and they really think about process after the fact. And processes should be designed when your company has been designed. Plus, you should revisit your processes on an annual basis. And you should make sure that your processes are designed with the customer experience in mind. Here's a perfect example. Have you watched the movie The Founder?
This is Ray Kroc.
Well, yes, it's based upon the McDonald brothers and the Ray Kroc story, right? So did you watch it?
I have not seen it yet.
Oh my gosh, you got to see that movie.
Okay.
So the McDonald brothers, not even Ray Kroc, the McDonald brothers went out to the tennis court, empty tennis court, took all their employees. They all got in a position. It took them all day to figure out their processes. Who's gonna take the order? Who's gonna toast the bun? Who's gonna cook the burger? Who's gonna put the 2 pickles on the bun? Who's gonna, package it up and hand it to the client? And they did it with the customer experience in mind because back then in the 50s, they only had drive-ups. And the objective that McDonald brothers were trying to achieve was good tasting quality food in a very short period of time. That was their objective. And they wanted the customer experience to be happy, love the food, and get it quick. So they designed their processes with the customer experience in mind. Most companies don't do that. I can't even begin to tell you, Mark, how many times I'm doing business with a company, and I'm like, you really should go rethink your processes because you're inconveniencing the customer. You're not making it easy for us to do business with you. Yeah. And so many businesses are going out of business because if you don't take care of your customer, somebody else will. And if the processes are not efficient and productive design with the customer experience in mind, you'll be going out of business.
Yeah. And I asked about process. Sorry to jump ahead in the order. But
That's okay.
Process is a word that's near and dear to my heart as an engineer. I help organizations with process. And I'm curious what your experiences are. I've seen in a lot of organizations, and this includes healthcare organizations, the process just evolved. Nobody ever took the time to step back and design it. So then
Hmm.
you've got just the way it sorted itself out, and then people are too busy to take that pause and go back and define processes. So it sounds like the McDonald brothers and other businesses are smart to take time up front
I
and build
think,
that foundation, right?
no, I think you're accurate in what you said. Most businesses, it just kind of sorts itself out or it kind of evolves.
In a way.
Most business owners don't really think about it. Most entrepreneurs are not engineers. They don't always have that mindset and they don't always think about the foundation. They just think about getting clients and making widgets and getting them out there. They don't really think about the processes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it more happens the way you just said that it happens. McDonald Brothers were different and I did design it. But if you look at, I think it was Dollar Shave Club that completely changed their processes that took them to $1 billion company.
Mm-hmm.
So processes are huge and business owners really should be going back and looking at those processes to make sure it takes the customer experience in mind because it's all about keeping clients happy, right?
Right.
And then you got to make sure those processes are documented in SOPs and policy and procedure manuals and make sure that the employees are trained on it, such. I mean, that's why McDonald's does so well because you can go to McDonald's in China or Russia or US and you get the same experience.
Yeah, I've heard it said, yeah,
Their
they sell
process.
consistency.
They sell consistency, which is processes. You can't have consistency without processes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and speaking of process, and maybe you can touch on your book again for the listeners. It's called Exit Rich, and the work that you've done, Michelle. How much of it? I mean, it seems like from your work that there is a process for getting a company ready to solve. It's not just flipping a switch. There's a lot of work.
There is a lot of steps, right?
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So Exit Rich is all about, well, let me kind of back up.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my second book on selling businesses. According to Steve Forbes, who by the way endorsed Exit Rich, says 8 out of 10 businesses don't sell. The reason 8 out of 10 businesses don't sell is because they're not ready to sell. They haven't planned their exit. So Exit Rich is all about planning. I call it the ST, which is Seiler Tucker, the ST GPS exit model. And that means going into your business from day one of buying or starting, determining your end game, determining what you want to sell your business for. So if you want to sell for $5 million, then that's fine. Set that mark that you want to sell for 5,000, reverse engineer it. What time do you want to sell it for? What time frame? 5 years? Okay. What is it worth today? What's your current location? What's your current evaluation? Then who is your buyer going to be? Because there's 5 different types of buyers. So that's kind of the GPS exit because the biggest mistakes, this is all about the mistake show, right? The biggest mistakes that business owners make is not planning their exit. They don't think about selling until they have to due to an internal or external catastrophic event occurring. And by that time, it's typically not in good shape. It's trending downward. They're not going to be able to sell it for value. They might be able to sell it for pennies on the dollar, but they're not going to be able to maximize value. So the best time to sell is when the business is doing well. So Exit Rich is all about helping business owners plan that GPS exit model and determine their end game, reverse engineering, and then build the business on the 6 P's. Because if you have a business that operates on all 6 P's, you're going to have a sustainable, scalable, and when you're ready, sellable business.
And that takes time. So what's the general lead time between somebody deciding they want to retire or they want to exit and start something else? I mean, how long does that take, especially considering if they have to work on these 6 P's to
So it really, I mean, that's like the $1 billion question, right, Mark? Because it really depends upon what stage you're in. You know, if if a business owner is not doing well and really is only functioning on a few of the 6 P's and wants $10 million for their company, it could take a while to build that $10 million company. But if they come to me and say, look, I just need out, I need to pay off my debt, then it could be much quicker. So it just really depends upon where they are in a cycle. A lot of business owners will come to me and say, I want $20 million for my company. And I'm like, okay, how did you come up with that value?
Right.
And they're like, well, that's what I need to retire on.
Well.
Or that's what I need to pay for my kids' college. Or that's what I need to divorce my spouse. Or, whatever the reason may be. And buyers don't care about your reasons. They care about value.
Right.
So, I mean, I've taken companies. I have one company that we sold for 18 million. They had 18 patents. 3 months, we sold the company. We appraised it in a 9.8 million and sold it for 18 million. I had one company take me 6 years to sell. So it just really depends on how long can they hold on, how old are they, what are the events, are there any internal events, are there any health issues, partner disputes. I mean, it just goes on and on and on about what the issues are. Is there environmental issues and we got to relocate? I mean, the list just never ends. So it's hard to answer that question because you just got to really figure out what stage they're in.
Yeah. And does it also depend on how much work needs to be done? How solid and ready are they to be sold at a good valuation?
Right. And, I can get my clients a number, but it might not be their number. And that's why I go through the seller sanity check with my clients and say, okay, well, I can sell your business for $1 million, but you're wanting 5 and we're nowhere close to 5. So this is your choice. You either sell it for $1 million or you build it to sell. And here's the steps.
Yeah. Yeah. And you do that work with companies over time, or do you bring in other advisors to come help them build the business?
So I do a little bit of everything. I'm not a consultant. I don't trade time for dollars, so to speak. I have partnered with business owners, putting up my expertise, my resources, invest my money, and I do that for equity. And then for a management fee. So I don't, I do that for businesses. I really think I can deliver massive value and that has a niche. I'm not going to be in a restaurant. I'm not going to be in businesses that don't have a niche. So I do that. I've also bought in consultants before. And then I have a program that we're coming out with called Build to Sell. It's a step-by-step blueprint, online educational platform that business owners can go through and follow the steps.
And so it sounds like that partnership and investing, it reminds me a little bit of the show The Profit with Marcus Lemonis. Without being televised, you're really kind of stepping in and
I really am. I really do what Marcus does. And, I should have my own show. The difference is I build to sell. He doesn't really have an exit strategy in mind when he does it. And he takes things I would never take.
Just in terms of the industry and the types of products.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to see me in the restaurant business because I know that's not me.
So how you mentioned earlier you had been involved in, did you say selling franchises? And then how did you transition into, I'm really fascinated in this business of helping people sell their businesses.
So it was quite an easy transition because I had been working for one company in particular where I was a partner with them. And I was doing everything. I was selling the franchises. I was doing the pulling the demographics, doing the site locations, doing the build out, organizing the build out, organizing the staffing. I was really doing everything. But I was a partner, and it got to a situation where I sold so many franchises that they couldn't keep up. So they were over-promising, under-delivering. And I just said, you know what, you got to buy me out because I'm not going to sell any more franchises until you get it together. Typical company who has a great idea. And then I went out and sold a bunch of franchises, but they never built that foundation.
Yeah.
So after they bought me out, I decided to transition into selling businesses because selling franchises, selling businesses is very similar.
And do you do work all across the U.S.?
I do. And Canada. We've done things in Canada. We've done things in Colombia and Trinidad.
Yeah. And what industries do you focus most on? You mentioned manufacturing earlier, at least.
So I'm industry agnostic. We're more EBITDA specific.
Okay.
We have over 25,000 buyers on our database, and we have buyers for good businesses. There are actually more buyers for good businesses than there are good businesses to buy. So we're more EBITDA specific. When the EBITDA is over $1 million, we have hundreds of buyers for each business.
And then that helps drive up. I mean, if you've got potential buyers, that's how you help get a better price for the seller.
Right. We can create a bidding war because we know what buyers want. We know what buyers are looking for. We know how to create those synergies because buyers will outbid other buyers for synergies. If a buyer can buy a contract, like for instance, we sold a company in Louisiana, oil manufacturing again, but they had customer concentration. And they had 60% of the revenues tied up in the BP contract. We had 12 LOIs on this business. And we found a strategic that had a similar product, but different. I had been trying to get in BP for years and could never get in. Well, that's their in. So they bought that company because they knew it was synergistic, and they knew that once, they had that relationship, they would get their other products and services in there, and which they did.
Yeah. So again, our guest here is Michelle Seiler Tucker. Her upcoming book is Exit Rich, the 6P Method to Sell Your Business for Huge Profit. So Michelle, I know people will get obviously so much more detail from the book. We've covered, we've got people, we've got process. Can you throw the other 4 Ps at us?
Sure. I don't know if you can ask me. So one is product. Number 2 is product. So you got to ask yourself, is your business an Amazon or is it a Blockbuster?
Mm-hmm.
Is it thriving or is it dying?
Mm-hmm.
Industries that were exploding before COVID are now dying, and industries that were dying before COVID are now exploding.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you're in a dying industry doesn't mean you quit.
Right.
If you're in a dying industry, then you got to pivot. You got to look at, okay, you got to ask yourself, what business am I in? And what business should I be in?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what Steve Jobs did when he came back to Apple. Apple was dying. Mm-hmm. He asked, what business are we in? And they also were in a computer business. He said, no. What business should we be in? And he said, well, we should be in a communications business. And that one question alone, which sparked that answer, developed the iPhone, the iPad, the iPod, and everything which, by the way, that brand Apple right now is the largest brand in the world.
Right.
Value is $380 billion. That's without assets, cash flow, furniture, fixtures, equipment, or anything. So you got to ask yourself, is your industry thriving or is your industry dying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got people, you got product, you got processes. The 4th P is the biggest value driver, and that's proprietary.
Mm-hmm.
So people pay for brands.
Mm-hmm.
Coca-Cola, the Coca-Cola brand is worth $89 billion without any cash flow. Apple is worth $390 billion without any cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
So build your brand, build your value. Same thing with your company name. You'd be surprised, Mark, how many business owners get a local trademark, but never a federal trademark on their company name. They get the domain, they get the company name, but guess what? Somebody else starts using it, and before you know it, they're in a lawsuit.
Right.
And if they didn't protect their company name, they're out. So you gotta get trademarks. You gotta protect your company name. You gotta protect your logo, your slogan, like the 6P method.
Mm-hmm.
That's trademarked. The ST GPS exit model, even Exit Rich, I got trademarked.
Right.
Yeah. So get this stuff trademarked and get patents. These are value drivers.
Right.
The other big value driver is contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And for all of your listeners, get client agreements. Client agreements are huge, and it drives value. But get manufacturing agreements, vendor agreements, distributor agreements. But here's the caveat to that. 99% of all business owners never have a transferability clause in their contract. 99.9% of all sales are asset sales because the buyers don't want the liability. That deal will stop dead in its tracks if the contracts are not transferable. It's 2 sentences. So that's number 1. You got to have transferable contracts. Also, I mean, we're dealing with a manufacturing business that has a manufacturing plant in Canada. They have no agreement with them. They have no backup plan. And that manufacturing business goes out, they're out of business. You should never put all of your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Always have backup plans. The other thing that's big on proprietary is databases. And it's probably the most overlooked and the most undervalued, but it has the biggest value. Facebook paid $19 billion for WhatsApp, and WhatsApp was hemorrhaging money. But WhatsApp had 1 billion users, and Facebook knew they could ROI and monetize that. One other thing on proprietary that's huge, e-commerce businesses. If you're selling home goods and you're number 1 on Wayfair, guess what that is? That's real estate that is very hard to get. If you have a niche product and you've cornered the market for that particular industry on Amazon, that's huge value. If you got Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck or anybody from the Kid Craddock show endorsing your product, that's huge value. So that drives up the price. The 5th P is patrons. and patrons is customer base. One of the biggest issues with businesses is that they stop asking their clients, what do you need? What do you want? How can I make your life easier to do business with us?
Do they start assuming, or they
start
think they know?
assuming, they become complacent. When I wrote Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth in 2013 and did the research, 85 to 95% of all startups would fail. We all know that, right? That's common knowledge. I'm not teaching you anything you don't know. However, I bet y'all don't know this. When I wrote Exit Rich in 2019 and did the same research, there are 30.2 million businesses in the U.S. employing over half the U.S. workforce. Out of 27.6 million businesses, 70% of those businesses that have been in business at 10 years or longer are at great risk of going out of business. 70%. And only 30% of startups will go out of business now. Only 30%. So you hear about the big box stories like Toys R Us, Kmart, JCPenney's, but you're not hearing about the private small companies on every street corner in every city and every state across our great nation that are dropping like flies before COVID. And the reason for that is because of lack of aim. Aim is always innovate, always market. Always innovate, always market. It's like Blockbuster. Netflix came in, Blockbuster did nothing. They sat there fat and happy and did nothing, and they lost everything. So business owners got to stop being complacent. And whoever makes it easiest for the consumer to do business with them is the one who's going to win. Amazon wins because Amazon asked themselves, what business are we in? They were in the book business. But then they said, what business should we be in? What are we really, really, really good at? We're in a fulfillment business. So let's take on everybody's products. And hey, by the way, we can sell a horse too. So that's what business owners stop doing. They stop asking, what business are we in? What business should we be in? What do our clients want? What do our clients need? How can we make it easier to do business with them? And the last one is profits, the most important. So profits is always a symptom, never the problem. Always a symptom, never the problem of not operating on one of the 5 Ps. Because Mark, if you don't have the right people, you're going to lose profits. If you're not in the right industry and your product is suffering, you're going to lose profits. If your processes are not efficient and productive and you lose clients because they're angry about your service, you're going to lose profits. If you haven't protected your IP, you're going to lose profits. If you have customer concentration like patrons, it's customer concentration. Then here's another thing. A business has been in business for 20, 30, 40 years. Guess what happens? Their customers age out. And they stop marketing to people who are spending money. And the way millennials do business is not the same way that baby boomers did business.
So there's just this gold mine of different business mistakes that you've mentioned here that would interfere with someone's ability to exit rich. And it seems like that's really what your life and your work and your book really focused on, helping people maximize what they get out of something that they've put their life into.
Right. And you don't know what you don't know, right? So it's not what you know that gets you in trouble. It's what you don't know that gets you in trouble. But yeah, we try to help clients not make some of these mistakes so that when they're ready, they can exit rich.
And we learn by making mistakes, but there's a time to learn from someone else's mistake. And it seems like that's a reason for hiring you to benefit from that experience.
A genius learns from other people's mistakes. I love the name of your show.
Thank you. And love the name of your book. And Michelle, can you tell people about some of the pre-order opportunities, some of the special offers that are available even right now?
Sure. So Exit Rich was endorsed by Kevin Harrington, which was original Shark Tank, and Steve Forbes. If you go to exitrichbook.com, that's exitrichbook.com, and buy the book now for $24.79, includes shipping. You will immediately receive the digital download. You will get free access, lifetime membership into the book club, which has training of me talking about all this stuff in great depth. Plus, it has document downloads. Like if you've never seen a due diligence checklist before, I have one. If you've never seen an LOI, there's one in there. If you've never seen what closing docs look like, I have one in there. So everything you need to build a sustainable, scalable, and sellable business is in there. Plus, they get 30 days a free membership into Club CEOs, where we do hot seats, masterminds, and have conversations just like this. So we can focus on what business are you in? What business should you be in?
Yeah.
And all of those type questions. So we get the right answers to help people not only survive this pandemic, but thrive afterwards.
Right.
And when the book comes out in January, we ship it to your door.
There's a lot that's offered there, and I hope people will check that out. And you mentioned Kevin Harrington. I was really thrilled when I had the chance to interview him and the co-author from his most recent book, Mark Tim. They were guests on episode 1 of this podcast series. So if somebody is listening to this for the first time because you know Michelle and her work, I'd invite you to check out Kevin's episode and everything else that we have here in the series. So we've been joined today by Michelle Seiler Tucker of the firm Seiler Tucker. And again, her new book, Exit Rich, the 6P Method to Sell Your Business for Huge Profit. Michelle, thank you so much for sharing a lot of really interesting experiences and insights with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure being here.